Good day, ladies and gentlemen. So this is our second week for the first quarter of oral communication in context, and this is a run-through of the second module focusing on the models of communication. So targets for this week, ladies and gentlemen, are as follows: to identify the models of communication and to differentiate the various models of communication. So your module starts with an activity called do this. In this activity, you are going to identify. We're going to read these two articles, and then after we read them, we will answer questions that follow. So, first article reads, Dieter is a senior high school graduate and he wanted to apply for a job. While he was strolling around the street, he was given a flyer about an opening job in a department store. After reading the details, he left the area immediately. On the second article, we have Lorraine went to Kamalig sa Balud, a restaurant at Barangay Tabunan, Lemery, Iloilo. When she entered the place, the waitress welcomed her and catered her on her table. Then she presented the menu book to Lorraine. After a few minutes, the waitress asked for her order. Lorraine told the waitress what she wanted for her lunch. The waitress repeated her orders and asked her again if there's anything she wanted more. Lorraine shook her head and gave her a smile. So these two articles are showing scenarios of everyday life, and we will follow them with these questions. Which of the two situations presents a linear communication? We could only be able to answer these questions if we have prior knowledge of what a linear communication is. So what do you think? Which of the two situations, the first one with Dieter or the second one with Lorraine, which of the two presents a linear communication? Number 2, which one presents a transactional communication? So we can only answer this again if we are already familiar what a transactional communication is. Third, which situation lacks feedback? Fourth, which situation has a feedback? And 5, which situation presents 5 elements only? So we have already talked about the elements of communication in our last module, first week. Okay, and we know that there are more than just 5 elements. However, if we look back into the scenarios presented earlier, one of them was able to present only 5 elements, and most probably this one which presents the 5 elements is the same situation that lacks feedback. And since it lacks feedback, then there is only one way communication. That same situation would also be the only linear communication among the examples. Okay, so next part of your module is explore. Here we tackle about, or we answer the following questions. Based on the given example, what is a linear communication? How about transactional or two-way process communication? How does the process of communication occur in situation number 1? And how about in situation number 2? How do the types of communication differ from one another? So let's try to look back into the two situations. Okay. On the first situation, if we notice, we have only Dieter. Dieter wanted to look for a job. And while he was walking, he was given a flyer, something which he has to read. He read a flyer, perhaps, and then he left the area immediately. So he was not able to talk to anybody, but he was able to receive information from the flyer. In the second situation, we see that Lorraine went into a restaurant, and then she had a short conversation with the waitress. The waitress talked to her, and then she talked back to the waitress regarding her order before the waiter left to get her what she wanted. So if you have noticed, on the first situation, we only have one way because Dieter was not able to respond to the information that he received from the flyer. However, on the second situation, we have two people interacting with each other. These two would be best examples to exemplify the difference between linear communication and a two-way process communication. Okay, so let's talk about these types of communication. Communication takes a big part in your daily activities. Communication varies in many ways through the help of technology. It is important for you to know how communication is carefully used based on different situations. So here are the models of communication. We have three types of communication models: the linear or the one-way, the transactional or the two-way, and the interactive, which is a bit more complex than transactional. In what ways and how, we will look into each model of communication first. So the first model that we have falls under linear type. This is the Shannon-Weaver model, which was published by Shannon and Weaver in the year 1949. In this model, communication is depicted as a linear or a one-way process. It is known as the mother of all communication models. If you have noticed in our picture there, we have an arrow, or we have a flow from left to right. Information source, going to transmitter, going to receiver, going to destination. However, when it falls under destination, the information does not, or there is no more way from the destination back to the information source. That is why it is called linear or one way, because the information flows only in one direction. Okay, then we have a noise or a noise source, which disrupts the flow of communication. Next, we have Lastpass Model, which was published in 1948. This is also known as the action model or one-way model. It is regarded as the most influential communication model. So if you can see in the picture, it looks like a stairway moving from one step to another, from the sender to the message to the channel to the receiver to the feedback. Okay, so this is Lastpass model, and if you notice, it ends with a feedback, and the feedback is not relayed back to the sender. It's just perhaps the reaction of the receiver. Okay, so who says what, to what channel, for whom or to whom, and with what effect. This is the content, the steps of Lastpass model of communication. Third model is Aristotles Model, which was of course there since 3000 or 300 BCE, or before Common Era. Okay, now it is of course the first and the earliest linear model. We know Aristotle lived before Christ, and so we will assume of course that his model was there before Christ also. Now Aristotle's model, if you notice here in the picture, has two arrangements. The first one is the original Aristotle's model, which did not appear actually on your module, because what appeared there is already the later development made by scholars. Okay, so it was developed by people who tried to give more meaning and impact into this model. Originally, Aristotle has identified only three elements in the communication process: the ethos or the speaker, the logos or the message, and the pathos or the inheres in the audience, or that is actually the effect. So Aristotle was trying to present communication only in a public approach, not exactly a one-on-one approach, but a public approach. Because he had one speaker, he had one message, but he's expecting pathos, which is the reaction of a big audience. This is why it is now developed into the speaker, the speech, the audience, and then the effect into the audience. So they split pathos into just the audience hearing and then the audience reacting, which is the effect. And then they also added the idea of occasion or the context in which the communication occurred, because they have to be at the same occasion, both the speaker and the listener or the audience, in order for them to create communication, to communicate effectively. Next, we have Burlesque Model, which was published in 1960. This is also otherwise known as the SMCR model. Okay, it focuses on the encoding and decoding, not really on the sender, not the message, not the receiver, but the process of creating the message, delivering the message, receiving the message, and understanding the message. So Berlo focused more on how the message is understood, how the message was sent, how it was received, and how it was understood. So if you notice on the picture, we have there the source, which highlights communication skills, attitude, knowledge, social systems, and culture, which has to be of the same level as the receiver, who must have the same communication skills, almost the same attitude, knowledge, social systems, and culture. Otherwise, if there is conflict between these elements or compositions of the source and the receiver, then communication may not be effective. Then in the middle of the source and the receiver, we have the message, the information being sent, which carries the content, which has to consider the elements, the treatment, the structure, and the code, and the channel, the means by which it is delivered: hearing, seeing, touching, smelling, tasting, or any of the senses. This is how we deliver the message. This is the way by which we deliver the message. So the message is what has to be delivered. It has to have complete content, correct elements, proper treatment, correct structure, and proper coding. And then it has to pass through the correct channel in order for the receiver to understand it the way the source wanted it to be understood. Again, we must consider that the source and the receiver should be of the same communication skills, attitude, knowledge, social system, and from the same culture. Next, we have Barnlund's model. This is the first model here we have that falls under transactional type of model. Barnlund's model articulates that sending and receiving of messages happens simultaneously between people. It cannot just happen one way. It has to be simultaneous between two people. Something should work in both the communicator or both the communicators, which are considered as the sender and the receiver. So if you notice in the model, both participants are considered communicators because both has to encode and has to decode. The message has to cross in between them. That is why this is called transactional model, because there has to be an exchange of action, an exchange of encoding versus decoding in between the communicators. Both communicators send, both communicators receive. Both has to encode, both has to decode in order for communication to take place. This is what Barnlund believed to be the process of communication. Next, we have Scrums Model, which was published in 1954. This one is the third type of model, which is called interactive, because communication, according to Scrum, can take place if and only if there's an overlap between the field of experience of the speaker and the field of experience of the listener. So if you notice in our model, or in our picture here, now in Scrum's model, there is no sender, no receiver, just like what we have in Barnlund. No sender, no receiver, because both are considered as participants who have to encode, to decode, and to interpret the message. However, they must be able to encode, to interpret, and decode the message in the same way, which is only possible, according to Scrum, if they have the same field of experience. Now, what is a field of experience? These are the things that influence the understanding and interpretation of message, like culture, social background, beliefs, experiences, values, and rules that are, or that govern the participant. So again, the speaker and the receiver should have the same field of experience in order for exchange of communication to properly take place. This is what Schramm believed in his model, published in 1954. Next part of our module is apply what you have learned. So after learning about the different models given to you earlier, we are now going to find out how much we have learned in this module. So we will have this activity number 2, no more. We're going to fill in this table using information that we have gathered through this module. You may also find the answers in the internet. You may also go and look for answers in other books or references. In this table that we had to fill in, we have 4 columns: the model of communication, the feature, the pros, and the cons. We have linear, transactional, and interactive model of communication. We have an example for linear, Burlesque Model. Then we have Barnlands for transactional and Scrums for interactive. We already gave feature for Burlesque communication, the pros, and the cons. So all you have to do now is just to fill in the feature, the pros, and the cons of the transactional and interactive models which were presented to you in this module. Okay, what are the features of Barnlands model of communication? What are the features of Scrums model of communication? What are the pros? What is nice about it? What's good about it? And what are the cons? What's bad about it? What is not good about this model? Okay, that's all you have to write down and fill in this table. Next, we have another table for activity 3. Tell the difference. You only have to identify the strength and the weaknesses of the different types of communication models. For a linear or a one-way communication model, like Aristotle, like Shannon and Weaver, what would be the strength of these one-way communication models? And what is the weakness of these one-way communication models? For transactional, what are the strengths of these models and what could be the weakness of these models? And for interactive, what could be the strength and what could be the weakness? So it's up to you to fill in with information that may have come from your module, or you may also include information that you have searched in other references. Then we go to your reflection part. In activity 4, we are going to write down. Continue the paragraph that starts with I thought. What are the things that you thought were regarding the models of communication? Kumbaga, ano yung inyong mga prior expectations, prior knowledge about the different models of communication? And what have you learned now after doing this module? What have you realized now after reading this module, after looking at this video run through? So before and after, what we have known versus what we already know about the models of communication. Then assessment of what has been learned. Okay, in this part we're going to identify whether the following situations are linear, transactional, or interactive communications. Okay, so we will answer this together. You may write your answers down on your answer sheets as we go on with number 1. Christine went to a sari-sari store to buy a folder for her portfolio. Christine said, Aling Julie, do you have a white folder? Aling Julie replied, yes, a short or long size. Christine, I need a short size folder. Aling Julie, is this all? Christine, yes. Then Christine went home after buying the material she needed. Obviously, there is communication here because there is an exchange between Christine and Aling Julie. The question, however, is what type of communication was presented? Was it one-way? Was it two-way? Or was it interactive? safer, I would say, was it linear, was it transactional, or was it interactive? There were two of them talking to each other here. They understand each other. We could consider this as transactional conversation or communication. Next, number 2. Arman was alone in the library. He was reading a history book. While seriously reading, he kept on nodding his head as if he was agreeing with the details written in the book. After reading, he returned the book in the shelf and left the area. So what type of communication is being presented here? Arman was alone. He was reading information. He was getting the message from the book written by the author. He was able to do feedback. He was nodding his head because he agreed with the information given in the book. But does that make the communication transactional? Does it make it interactive? No, because there's only one active participant. And therefore, we can consider this as an example of linear communication. Number 3. It's market day. Angelo decided to go to the market to buy a new shirt. When he had chosen the shirt, he approached the vendor. Manong, how much is this shirt? It's only 180 pesos. Will you take it? Is this the last price, Manong? Okay, I can give it to you for 160 pesos. Will you take it now? Yes, Manong. Here's the money. So if you notice, ladies and gentlemen, it's not just a simple conversation. They were able to understand each other because of the context of them trying to relate with each other regarding the price of the commodity or the price of the shirt in this case. So we will consider this not just transactional but interactive because they have to interact with each other. They have to exchange and understand information regarding the last price of the shirt. Number 4. Chanel was so excited for her birthday party to be celebrated next month. Her mother works in Canada, so she decided to have a video call with her to discuss her debut venue plan. Chanel: Mother, did you remember your promise that we will celebrate my special day? Yes, Anak, I remember it. Do you have any plan for your 18th birthday? Yes, I have a plan. Would it be okay to celebrate my birthday party at Grandpa's house? Of course, that's a good idea. I think you need to call your grandpa and grandma right now. Yes, Mother, I will call them right away. Thank you and goodbye. Okay, so again, there are two people conversing, talking to each other through video call in this situation. What makes this transactional or interactive? Which of the two types of communication would this fall into? They are both talking about the birthday. They are both of the same background. They are both of the same context, and we can see that they were able to understand each other because they are of the same field of experience. They are mother and daughter who probably spent time together in the past, and therefore it is easy, especially because if you have their mother, did you remember your promise that we will celebrate my special day? Meaning there is a previous conversation about her special day. So they have to be of the same field of experience, making this an example of interactive communication. And lastly, Ian watched the news in the television. He listened to every details of the news about COVID-19 and the increasing number of the positive cases all over the country. He realized that this pandemic is a very serious one and everyone should take his or her part to win against the unseen enemy. Okay, so Kian was looking at the news, watching the news, registering information that he heard in the news. He did respond. For himself, he was able to realize, and he is trying to think about what should have been done, what could be done. But he was not able to relay this message to the people who sent him the news. Therefore, we can consider this as one-way or linear communication. So here ends, ladies and gentlemen, the contents of your Module 2. We will close up with a short quotation from Roy Bennett. Listen with curiosity, speak with honesty, act with integrity, because the greatest problem in communication is we don't listen to understand. We listen to reply. When we listen with curiosity, we don't listen with the intent to reply. We listen for what's behind the words. So it's not just listening in order to hear. It is listening because we wanted to know what's behind what we hear. What's important is the context, the message that the sender wants to deliver, and not just the sound of the voice or the channel by which the information is being sent. So we must listen with curiosity and speak with honesty. Thank you very much for joining me in this second run-through for oral communication in context. This is Sir Sertak signing off for Module 2, Week 2 of Quarter 1. Thank you very much and God bless everyone.